Welcome everyone. Week 1, Lecture 3 for the business environment. Today we're going to be looking into the external forces of the business environment. And in week 1, in our introductory video, you already came across the acronym called PEST, Political, Economic, Sociocultural, and Technological Forces. Now, these forces, they are predominantly external to the organization and therefore uncontrollable. In other words, they might have some positive or negative impact on our business operations. Why saying that? Let's go one step further. In other words, they can actually create the opportunities for our organization that we can grasp in our business industry, or also at the same time they can create a threat that can actually have a great impact on our operations. Now, let's go step by step and understand each and every one of those macro environment forces. Okay, let's start with the political environment. Political environment gives a shape to our business, gives us the laws and regulations that need to be followed. Some of those laws and regulations could be, for example, the employment law, the trade law, all the things that are important to define what are the parameters of our operations. At the same time, it's probably worth mentioning that out of the all acronyms, political, economic, sociocultural, and technological one, the political force is a little bit more riskier than the rest of them, purely for the fact that with the change in a political party might bring some changes in policies and procedures that will be introduced by the government. Now, at the same time, it does give us that administrative steps and that the organization need to follow coming in and out of our industry. And at the same time, political forces also give some form of protectionism to industry and the players within the same. So saying that, for example, any form of unfair business practices by our competitors or possibly foreign companies that are deciding to come to our economy will be looked very closely by the government and political forces to make sure that they do comply on equal playing field. At the same time, they will also give a protection to consumers from unfair business practices, such, for example, collusion, which is one of the common occurrence with the oligopolistic industries. It's also worth mentioning that out of all past factors, political force brings some sort of risk that has to be closely managed. And we've seen over the last few decades that a lot of industries are heavily supporting political parties that might bring favorable political decisions that will benefit those players within a specific industry. Let's now have a look at the political environment. Let's now have a look at the economic environment. There are many factors that we take into consideration to understand the current economic environment. Things such as, for example, business cycle, inflation, employment or unemployment current rate. Now, with the business cycle, it is important to understand where is currently we're finding our economy to be, from the growth to the decline to possible recession and shrinking of the business environment that we are currently operating within. We've seen over the 2020 that most of the countries around the world have experienced the rather than growth, experienced the decline and shrinking of their economies, with a massive increase of unemployment and the layoff of the workforce, particularly in the service-based industries that were ravaged by pandemic COVID-19. We also take into consideration inflationary the pressures. For example, with the number of jobs created within the economy, we know the employment will grow, therefore unemployment will decline. But that itself also brings the inflationary pressure because consumers are having more of a disposable incomes that can spend on the things that they like luxuries, and itself greater consumer expenditure puts the inflationary pressure on the Reserve Bank of Australia to increase the interest rates and therefore curb the economic spendings. Other things, for example, like trade policies, even though when we mention trade policies, we can possibly refer more to a political force, which we mentioned a few slides back. But you got to understand that some of those political decisions, like for example, a free trade agreement, will have some economic implications on the industry that we are operating within. Therefore, will open the door for our export to the foreign markets, increasing our economic performance within a particular sector. Also, when we're mentioning free trade agreements, we've seen recently, for example, that United Kingdom left the Brexit and or left the European Union through Brexit form, and that itself has a major role to play in their economic forecast. Now, on the other hand, we've seen that within the European Union, German economy performing exceptionally well. A few years back, they came to the verge of the recession, but they managed to pull out through the great form of foreign direct investment. On the other hand, countries such as in Italy, Greece, Spain, Portugal, they are still struggling within the European Union due to the fact of the one common currency, but also their inability to economically turn their current performance into the marketplace. On the other hand, when we're talking about the sociocultural environment, there are an array of factors that we have to take into consideration. Let's start with the demographic one, being possibly one of the most important one. We've seen in recent decade or so a massive debate on our aging population. People are living longer, they're looking after themselves, exercising far more than what they used to do in the past, and therefore we have, as a business within a particular industry, we have to take those things into consideration when we're tailoring our offer, targeting those segments of the market. Also, we've noticed that in recent times, we've seen a shift in the living pattern of the demographic forces. Younger people are living now a lot closer to the CBDs in the cities, in sky rises, where on the other hand, families are a lot more moving to suburbia, where they're finding a lot more space to bring their families up. Those things are extremely important in the sense of our business running, predominantly like in the sense of opening our stores where our target market actually stays. In concept of our manufacturing facilities, where do we open our factories? Of course, closer to proximity of our workers. Now, also aspect of the size of the family, we've seen in recent times that actually trend is declining. So probably 30 years ago, we were talking about 2.4 kids per family in Australia. Today, that fits around 1.8, 1.7%, 1.7 per child per family. Now, all these things are extremely important in the business decision making, and we do not have a control over those factors and those changing factors. A culture and subculture are also playing important part. We've seen that the people are now exploring those cultural differences a lot more in order to tailor the specific products targeting those cultures. Like for example, certain cultures have maybe preferences toward the certain colors, and our packaging and our promotional concepts are basically adapted based on understanding of those different cultures. The most dynamic task force would be technological environment. Over the last 20 years, we've seen a massive technological development in the communication industry. I believe itself has opened up an array of opportunities for businesses to explore in the way they do their business and the way they deal with the customers. Technological advance in communication have opened up the doors and opportunities for a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. But over the course of the last 20 years, we've seen that some of those businesses have grown tremendously, being probably among the top 100 businesses globally, referring to, for example, companies such as Alibaba, Amazon, PayPal. Part of the Tesla of the corporation is also Tesla company, and of Facebook, and all the all social media platforms. So we've seen a massive opportunity for businesses to explore option of dealing with their customers on a completely different level and on a completely different communication platform. But what does it mean in the future? Basically, technological environment keeps looking into the tools, method, and techniques that will allow the communication to take place. Now, when we talk about tools, we are probably referring more to the physical big manufacturing tools. And also we've seen the growth of the concepts such as 3D printing and itself the benefit of the same in housing industry, particularly in America and Europe. Now, at the same time, these technological developments allow the businesses to explore different type of the shopping experiences. In the recent times, we've seen a sudden shift of the purchasing pattern more so toward the online platforms rather than a brick and mortar. All we needed at that point in time was a pandemic that actually ravaged the economies worldwide, and we've seen people switching their purchasing pattern and moving to online shops. Now, at the same time, that actually changes the consumer preferences. So what we were saying before was the sociocultural environment. So at the beginning of today's class, we mentioned that interdependence of these macro environment forces and how important they are in changing the way we do our business. Now, keep one also thing in mind that these technological changes will not stop anytime soon. According to the researchers in United States, a mobile phone today is already the size of the contact lens, which can be put inside your eye and the earpiece inside your ear, and you can be on the phone talking to someone far away from yourself, and as you already know, in possibly another continent. So these technologies will keep evolving, but at the same time it will also raise a lot of ethical issues. We have to take into consideration things such as, for example, privacy, ethically introduced products onto the marketplace, intellectual property, and so forth. Now, with this particular point, we're going to conclude on our external environment. Take care. See you next video.